Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I want to thank you for all the messages and kind words about making it to episode 400. I remember when I started this thing, I was thinking, if I can make it to 100 episodes, this will be a success. So I've done what I set out to do and then some. My next goal is to have my most epic guest of all time for episode 500. I have an idea of who that will be, but I'm not sharing that information now as I still have 2 years before I get there. What I am excited about is the weather. It's getting colder in places and the snow's starting to fall, but the season really won't start for a while. So what I'm really excited about is my guest this week. I've been trying to get legendary filmmaker Johnny Decesare on the podcast for years and it hasn't worked out. He's been traveling the world for surf events and the timing didn't line up until now. If you don't know who Johnny is, well, he was the one that brought the new school movement, think twin tip skiing, to the masses with his films under the Boyz Productions name. His story is a cool one and I'm not going to spoil it in the intro. One thing I will do is I'll share some news that I've learned about the industry. Well, I'm not one to break stories on this podcast, and this might not even be a story. I do like to share what I hear when I know it to be true. And from what I gather from very reputable sources in Jackson Hole, it sounds like the TGR offices sold last week for millions. This is a huge building that created the magic of TGR, and without it, I wonder what that will mean as they move forward. Who knows? And while a real estate sale may not be a breaking news story, it will be interesting to see where this juggernaut of a media brand makes its new home office. While I'm on the topic of TGR, I should mention that it's movie premiere season. And if a ski movie comes to your town, go see it if you can. You'll be in a room with like-minded people and you'll have your mind blown for an hour or so. And they're always giving away a ton of prizes. This year, you can check out the TGR movie tour, the Matchstick Productions movie tour, Level 1's movie tour, and Solomon's Quality Ski Film Tour. I plan on hitting 3/4 of these, as Level 1 came and went without me knowing, and I was bummed on that, but whatever, I can't see them all. I guess you can see them all, but I didn't, and what I'm trying to say is I can't wait to lose myself in some good old-fashioned ski porn. What else I can't wait for is to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is to tell a friend about the show. I'm not a famous athlete with a built-in audience. I'm just a dude who researches like a madman and interviews people like no other in snow. And when you tell a friend about this show, it sure helps things grow, so please do that for me. Another thing I want you to do is buy one of my t-shirts. I worked with my favorite artist, Jeremy Baytall, to create the coolest podcast t-shirt ever made. And I'm not making this up. 9 out of 10 listeners agree. The Stabbin' Cabin t-shirt is a visual experience in t-shirt form, and it will enhance every aspect of your life. I only have extra large and mediums left, so get them before they're gone. Thanks for doing that. Thank you for listening. And finally, I want to ask you to listen to my sponsor ads, check out their websites, and buy their stuff. I only work with the best brands, and they are Outdoor Research, Elon Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Club Med, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's talk with Johnny Decesare. You made your name in action sports as a groundbreaking ski filmmaker, but you're a California kid who was first at home in water, and these days you're rubbing shoulders with the best surfers in the world. What's your role with the WSL?
Well, my role with the WSL is to be a sharpshooter. I'm basically shooting action on red at a lot of the events. Last year I think I did all of them but 2. This year I did 5 or 6 events, and yeah, it's pretty fun.
And it's like you were a surfer trapped in a skier's body in your ski career, it seemed like. And now is it pretty much like you're rubbing shoulders with the best surfers in the world and they've all become your friends?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they are the best surfers in the world and they're kind of like superstars. And some of them are like mega stars, like for example, in Tavarua just a couple of weeks ago, that was as good as it gets. It was fun. I was like a little kid, like I was with my heroes and they were trapped on an island. There was like 30 of the best surfers in the world. And there was a couple of us from WSL staying on the island to be able to do interviews and create some different pieces for them. And so I got to hang out with all of them, intimately in terms of like, we ate together, we, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I went and filmed them surfing, and then they would come back, and there would be like afternoon basketball, there would be ping pong, there would be tennis, because it's all on this little tiny island. And they'd be like, "Hey, who wants to play?" And I'd be like, "Hey, okay, I'll go." And they'd be like, "Okay." So here I am playing tennis with Kelly Slater and ping pong with Gabriel Medina and Leo Favorante and Kanoe Igarashi and all those guys.
How do you fare when you play tennis with Kelly Slater? Is he like a super athlete at everything that he does?
He's the most competitive dude ever. He wants to win no matter what he's playing. He was playing with who's he playing with? Oh no, he was playing with Todd. So we have a mutual friend who's an incredible water cinematographer. I take that back. He's an incredible water photographer.
Okay.
He's a cinematographer as well, actually. Yeah, he's both. And he's taken photos of Kelly for 15 years. And he was on his team, and I was with Bad Boy Rai Rai. That's his Instagram handle.
Okay.
He's another photographer, and we played doubles match, and we actually won. So we were pretty stoked. I can say, "Hey, I beat Kelly Slater in something."
That's pretty amazing, man. That's so sick. So it's like you get to be friends with all these dudes, and you're part of the crew in your WSL life. But when you think about surfing and skiing are so different in terms of culture. Actually, every action sport seems different from surfing. Surfing seems to be the one sport that everyone loves more than their sport. Why is that?
I don't know. I think surfing is one of those like mystical things because you see it, on the screen, like on the internet nowadays, and you're like, "Oh, that looks cool." They're usually showing you like warm water,
yep,
girls in bikinis, tropical fruit drinks and palm trees and white sand. So I think it's got this like crazy mystical vibe. And then when you go do it, you're like, "Oh, it kind of is a crazy mystical vibe. It's kind of real." So I don't know. Surfing just has this cool allure. Like when I was doing the skiing thing full time, every single year, Shane Szocs, JP Auclair, and that whole crew, at the end of the season, we would go tropical. We would literally finish the movie, and it would be edited, and we'd do the very first premiere, whether it was at like the Oakley factory or some other place. And then we'd literally jump on planes, like sometimes the very next morning, and we'd be gone, and we'd go to Costa Rica. I think we did that for like 7 years in a row, and all those guys became surfers.
Is it almost like skiing becomes their job and surfing becomes their passion?
100%. It was the same with me. You want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
I said, I am never, ever going to work in the surf industry because it would ruin my hobby.
And now you're working in the surf industry, and it doesn't sound like it's ruined your hobby. It sounds like you beat Kelly Slater at tennis.
Yeah, it's kind of like it all worked out in the end. I was like, "Oh no, I'm doing it. I'm in the industry." And then I was like, "Hey, this isn't so bad. Hey, this is pretty good." So here's a good example of kind of some, and this is actually a shout out to all the people in the ski and snow world, is that I was asked the other day, I was like, "Whoa, dude, how hard is it to shoot skiing?" And I was like, "Oh, it's freaking kind of hard." And then I did a snow trip this year. I went to Japan, and I filmed with Marren Miller, and I filmed with Salema Masekela, and we did a LJ Enriquez documentary and a Zeb Powell LJ trip to Japan.
Okay.
So it was for a Marren Miller segment, and then it was also for a documentary for LJ, who's an up-and-coming phenom. He's insane at snowboarding. And so I went back, and I actually went with Scott Gaffney.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I remembered how freaking hard it is to film in the backcountry.
Carrying a 70-pound backpack in miserable conditions and post-holing and trying to get good angles?
It was just like a flashback. And I was like, damn, I have so much respect for all the guys that shoot in the snow world. Like skiing was my everything. That's all I wanted to do since I was like 12 years old. And I ended up doing that. I did it for like 25 years, 20 years straight, where it was like, I'm making movies.
Yep.
2 a year sometimes. And of course, I always loved to come back to the ocean every summer, but I never realized how hard it was. I never did. I always just thought that was just part of it. You did it. And that was what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I've always looked at the filmmakers in skiing and the cinematographers in skiing as the hardest workers out there. I mean, just seeing how they have to just stay in the elements, and you've got a $70,000 camera that you can't destroy, and there's so many things going on. It is so much harder than I would think, the sunny life of a surf filmmaker. But that's one part of surfing. One other part that I find really, really interesting is the locals only culture of surfing. And you grew up in LA and, and surfing all over there. And while surfers seem so chill, like they have that shaka bra lifestyle, it's the only sport other than MMA or boxing, I think, that really people fight their own. Is there any way to explain that?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of stupid, but kind of like real at the same time, because it's one of these things where, I've grown up with it and I've done my share of throwing like a stink eye at somebody. And yet I've had that done to me a lot in my growing up. And I've gotten reprimanded on more than one occasion when I was younger, surfing.
Just not knowing the etiquette?
Yeah, I showed up at some spot and, I don't live there. I drove there and, and I started just becoming a wave hog. I had 2 hours to surf. I knew I had to go back. And I was like, dude, I got to catch as many waves as I can. This is the most fun ever. But, in doing that, you kind of paddle past people. It's a weird thing in the lineup where there's kind of like a line. You don't call it a line, but it is. This guy went, this guy went, this guy went, this guy went, and this guy went in a row. And they kind of go to the back of the line and you kind of just work your way towards the peak. And if somebody paddles for something and misses it and you happen to paddle out, okay, you get the next one, even though that guy didn't get it because you're in better position now because he kind of blew it or you misread it or whatever. And then he'll kind of filter back out to where I took the wave from and so on and so forth. And people get waves and you kind of get into a rotation. But sometimes there's guys that just paddle right past you and go to the good spot.
So it's like if I'm waiting in a 25-person long beer line and someone cuts right in front of me at the end, I'd be pretty pissed off. That happens in surfing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So then, these guys surf there every single day and you just show up out of the blue. Like here I am, I drove 2 hours to get there, but these guys surf there every freaking day. They know everyone in the water. And then you paddle up and you kind of like hassle them for waves. That's when it gets weird. And that's where the localism kind of comes in. And, I've had my share where I got too excited and, started going under people or around people when they looked the other way. And, eventually someone's like, hey, brah, what you doing? What? Yay. And they start talking to you. So, then you get put in your place.
Okay. And the other locals only situation that I want to bring up has to do with your personal life. And your love story is like so incredible, like out of a movie incredible. I don't know all the details. I'm not going to bring up all the details. I know it starts in a bar in Panama where you meet a woman one night, she's the one, but then you take off the next day and you have to find her. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, I met my wife and actually I told a friend when she walked by me, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to marry that girl. Oh my God, that's it. I'm going to marry her. And then I ended up dancing and having the best time ever. She gave me her phone number. It was all good until I got home and I was like, wow, I lost her phone number.
Oh,
I can't believe it. So I lost her phone number and all I knew that is the city she lived in. I knew she was a photographer and she had braces and blonde hair and that was it. And I knew her first name. So I was calling all these places with broken Spanish and trying to figure out where. I didn't know there was 10 billion, photography places in Medellin, Colombia. So I called like 50 of them and I never got anywhere. And plus I didn't realize that people don't just give the people the phone, like you're like, hey, is Sandra there? And they're like, who's calling?
Yeah.
No, even if she was, right? So I had no chance. And then my dad was like, dude, it's Colombia. Just hire a detective. They'll find her. I was like, huh. So I hired a detective, which was really weird and creepy. But my dad was a detective, so he didn't think it was weird and creepy, although I did. And I found her. And she sent me a note with her phone number and her email. And it was happily ever after. And although there was 100 stories in between. But yeah.
That's so amazing that you were able to hire a detective. I heard like you sent a picture with your phone number or something. Someone delivered it to her. You guys were able to connect. You're married. You have a 12-year-old daughter today who's like part of the Colombian surf team, or she potentially could make the Colombian surf team, which has to be some really proud dad shit for you. But thinking of that, what's the fear level of a dad when you see your daughter in a heavy lineup and she's 12 years old?
Yeah, it's heavy. Believe it or not, she's actually 16 now. That's how
shit.
fast time flies.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's on the Colombia national surf team. She competes around the world. She did the Olympic qualifiers. She's super gnarly, and she wants to surf big waves.
Would things be scarier for you as a dad if she were on track to be a pro big mountain skier, or do the big waves scare you more?
I think, to be honest, skiing is scarier.
Just as so much more potential. I mean, I guess the risks in surfing, but skiing, anything could happen. Would that be why?
Yeah, I've just seen so much happen in skiing, like between avalanches and landing wrong and everything else. I think, she skis. She's a good skier, which is rad, which is really cool that she loves it. She ended up not being a snowboarder, which is kind of weird because she surfs, but she loves skiing. So she turned out to be a skier, and she loves skiing. But, me watching her go off like a little jump or something in skiing is like terrifying. and I remember guys flying 100 feet, and I'm like, come on, go bigger. So it's weird, but like surfing, I see her in giant waves and I'm not even scared. It's so bizarre.
Huh. Well, I'm going to tie this one more way to locals only. When you're a gringo in a place like Colombia, and I don't know how well gringos are accepted or even if they call them gringos there, I'm sure that's more Mexican. But what's the scariest situation you've been in Colombia?
The first time I ever went to Colombia to meet up with my wife when I flew back after I got her information and all that, she played a trick on me and she picked me up at the airport and said, because I was like, okay, I'm coming. I'm going to go visit you 3 days. And my dad was like, you got to be careful over there. It's crazy. You could get kidnapped, the whole deal. And he like freaked me out. And so when I got to the airport, I landed and she texted me and she says, I went to the bar. I was kind of wasted. Figure it out. And I was like, oh boy, this is not good. So I got off the plane and it's like the old scenario where you come out of the luggage place and there's a line of people and they're all screaming something and you're like, but you don't know what, except you do hear like taxi, taxi, taxi. And she was like, whatever you do, don't get in the wrong taxi or you'll never come home. And I was like, oh my God. And I walked out with my stuff and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And I walked past everyone, just kind of kept my head down, not looking up. And then I finally got to the curb and she was hiding behind like this big post, with her friend, and they were videotaping me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's how that started. And then, laughs, funny stuff. They give me some gifts and hugs. And I jump in the car and I drive through Medellin for the very first time at night, looking down off the city. And it was like out of a Pablo Escobar movie. And I was like, oh my God, this is the real deal. And she took me for like an hour-long drive, and I went into the barrios and into these dark, like almost favela streets.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is where I get kidnapped. Okay, I get it. This is it. And we got out of the car, and she's like, leave all your stuff. I just have to drop these posters off for someone's wedding tomorrow or something. She made up some excuse, and she had some posters in her hands. And I knew it was some sort of weird excuse, because why would I go with her?
Right.
So we're walking and it's like the darkest street ever. And I end up at a front door of this and it's like favela. They're all attached. Every building, they're all connected. And I walk up to this door attached to this building-ish thing. And I'm like, oh, here we go. It's completely black. There's no lights on. And she knocks at the door. And I'm like, is this safe? She goes, yeah. What are you talking about? And she knocks at the door and steps behind me. And I was like, oh, I had a good life. Amazing ski career. Everything's been great. I've done everything I've wanted to do, and it was all going through my mind. And the door opened, and it was completely black inside. I was like, what the heck? And she pushes me from the back. And I'm like, this is definitely where I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And then the lights come on, and there's mariachis and like 50 people inside of this little apartment. And it has a big sign that says, welcome to Colombia.
Oh, that is
and
amazing.
I almost died right there. And that's how it all started.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And I'm so stoked to have Club Med sponsor the podcast. And while some of you may be thinking, Club Med, isn't that for the best island vacations? Yes, while they offer the all-inclusive luxury experience in the islands, they're the only all-inclusive brand to offer mountain resorts globally. That's right. You can ditch the hassle of planning your ski vacation of a lifetime on your own and do it the Club Med way and book one of their trips to the snowy peaks of Europe, Japan, China, or Canada. When you travel with Club Med, you'll enjoy unlimited lift tickets, lessons for all levels, delicious meals, and endless après ski fun, all included in the price. And while your kids are having a blast at the supervised children's clubs, you can focus on mastering your skiing or après skills and creating unforgettable memories. To make it all happen for you or your family, visit clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or your travel advisor to experience ski without limits. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And while I've been talking about Elan all summer, I've been keeping some information from you that I'll share today. The award-winning ski that started Elan's cult following here in the US, the Ripstick, is brand new for 24-25. Think all new molds, all new sizes, new widths, and new tech. I got to ski these skis last season, and I'll say, the new models are still lightweight, they still have a ton of pop, and they'll still make you a better skier. But these new skis are even more stable at speed, which will allow them to handle burlier terrain than ever before. While you get more out of the Ripstick collection, Elan was able to build them without making them more demanding. So Ripstick fits even more skiers than before. While I loved my original Ripstick, what I skied last year was noticeably more fun, and I know the cult of Elan is going to grow even more with this new collection. If you're a person that demo skis and you haven't tried an Elan yet, make sure you try one this year and you'll feel how fun these skis are. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and they are your one-stop shop for getting out on the mountains, out on the water, out on the trail, and beyond. And they've been doing it for over 65 years. Peter Glenn is all about making sure that you have the best time possible outdoors. And they do that by having all the brands, all the products, and all the deals, both in-store and online. It's not about algorithms or AI. Peter Glenn is all about having the most knowledgeable staff who help you get what you need to get after it. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn has all the answers. And they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Well, I got way ahead of myself. And diving into your life and times, you grew up in Southern California with your older sister and your parents, and you're such a chill and easygoing dude who keeps things loose in a good way. But your dad, you said, I thought he was military. He might have been Green Beret, but he was a detective. Was that what he did?
Yeah, he's both. He was Green Beret back in the day, 182nd Airborne. So he was kind of gnarly.
Yeah, I mean, you being so chill, growing up with a military dad, were things really strict and regimented growing up?
At times, but he was kind of like this crazy military guy. So he was military, he did his time, then he got out, and he was like, oh, what am I going to do? So he's like, well, I guess I'll go to the police force. So he became a police officer, and within 5 years, he became a detective, and then he was, 25 years undercover.
Okay. And I'm guessing that you live close to the beach and you live that charmed California kid life where life's all about surfing and skateboarding?
Yeah, I wasn't that far from the water and, 45 minutes to the good surf breaks. But, we lived that California lifestyle and it was pretty fun. Yeah.
And you weren't supposed to be a skier, but like in 1984, you're watching ABC's Wide World of Sports and you see Franz Klammer win the downhill at the Hahnenkamm. And how did that moment change your life, watching TV and seeing that race?
Yeah, that was like the final straw. So I always had watched ABC Wide World of Sports. I was always watching ski events for some reason. They kind of grabbed me and I was like, wow, these race events are cool. And then that particular race just was like, whoa, this is so epic. And I went over to my mom and I was like, Mom, I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to be a skier. And she was like, you're too old. You don't ski very much. And I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, I need to go every weekend now. So before I could drive, I literally went every weekend with my mom and just started skiing. I remember when I was in junior high, junior high back then, you'd get $1 or $3 for lunch money or whatever it was back in those days. And I didn't eat for an entire year. Like, I didn't eat lunch. And every single day that my mom gave me $1, I saved it. And so I had all this money at the end of the year. So from January to like when we got out of school in December, the next, like one cycle,
Yep.
I literally didn't eat lunch.
That's crazy.
So what I did was I saved my dollar so I could buy ski equipment. And that's how I bought my first pair of skis.
That is crazy, and that is dedication, and your parents have to see that passion. And I would think between your mom taking you on the weekends and your sister gets her license and she starts taking you as well, and then you've got a school ski bus, how often are you able to ski, you think, each season in California?
I don't know. I skied, I would say, well, I don't know how many days exactly, but it wasn't like a kid in the mountains, who lived close enough where they could really go skiing all the time. But I still skied a lot. If I skied 6 days a month, that was a lot for me.
Yeah, it's a lot if you're driving.
Yeah, and it was a dedicated ski, if that makes sense. Like I skied, like I went up and down,
bell to bell, just as much as you
bell to
possibly
bell.
could.
And I begged my sister to take me. I don't know how you found that out, but I begged my sister to take me skiing, and then she started loving skiing, so we would just go all the time. Yeah, and then I did take the school bus, like. Anytime they had trips, I went. We did a really cool one to Park City. No, it wasn't Park City. It was like Alta and Snowbird.
Oh, so you got to ski some real shit in high school.
Real stuff. Like it was the deepest skiing I've ever done. For like 10 years of my life, that was definitely the deepest skiing. Even after I moved, some of the days that I had on that one ski trip were like chest deep snow. I'd never even seen snow that deep. So it was really fun to be on some cool ski trips. And I did the Mammoth ones, and I did all those kinds of things. And dude, I was just 100% in love with skiing. I wasn't a racer though, which is funny. Like I grew up idolizing the race thing, but I wasn't a racer. I had no desire to be a racer. I had watched Marren Miller movies during that period, and I fell into the old Scott Schmidt, Glenn Plake and all that kind of stuff.
And is this around the time, too, where you and your buddies start filming surfing? Because I think you have like a little VHS camera or like whatever the remedial old stuff was or early on technology.
I did.
Were you interested in like the art of filming back then, or was it more like you wanted to see footage of yourself?
It was kind of a little bit of both. I had more of the desire to actually film. Like I really liked it. I was like, ooh, filming's cool. But I would make my friends film me, obviously. I was kind of a... I wouldn't call it a leader. I would call it more like an instigator. Like I'd be like, let's do this. And people would be like, are you sure? I'm like, come on, let's go. And I'd be that guy.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I was kind of like a ringleader.
Sure.
Let's put it that way. And so I would always be like, hey, okay, you film me now. So then they would film me, and we'd watch ourselves surf. And I had a little VHS recorder that my parents gave me, and it had little mini VHS tapes. I don't know if you've ever seen those before.
The one that go in the big tape?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sick. So I did that, and we started filming, and it was surfing, and it was super fun, and I had a shoebox full of all these tapes, and it was epic. And then we started taking it to the mountains a little bit and film a little bit in the mountains, but not even thinking about filming skiing. And then one day I was just playing soccer, and I was coaching soccer, and I got headhunted, and I started working for IBM.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like right out of high school, right?
Yeah, right out of high school, I started working for IBM. I got kind of like headhunted from a parent within coaching. He's like, dude, you got this thing about you that you can lead. Come on to work for us. And I did like this stint at IBM. And when I was there, all I could think about was skiing. That's all I could think about was skiing. And I was like, okay, this is totally not what I want to do. Even though I'm making tons of money, it's really cool, but I need to go back to the mountains.
Were you bawling as like an 18-year-old? Were you like getting real IBM money and like, holy shit, people are looking at you like, how are you even doing this, Johnny?
Yeah, I was bawling.
That's incredible.
It was crazy. It was nuts. And so they'll never hire me again, but that's okay. I used to leave my computer open, and right at lunch, like even before lunch, it would be like 20 minutes before lunch, I'd leave my computer open, and I would split, because where IBM was at that time was in Burbank, and that was pretty close to this mountain where there was snow. And I would leave at lunch and just leave my computer open, and I would call like one of the secretary girls, and I'd be like, hey, can you shut my computer? And just if they ask, I'm in the bathroom. And I was ditching to go skiing, like just blowing off work.
At 18, that's amazing. Did you ever get caught, or were you able to ski on the IBM dime?
No, I got caught plenty, and they gave me 2 warnings. I was like, okay, I'm going to get fired. So I talked to my buddy who I grew up with. His name was Eric Shear. And I was like, I was looking in the magazines and they have work in Colorado. And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, I signed you up and I signed me up and we leave in a week if you want to go with me. And we're going to go work at Vail as like dish dogs. And he was like, are you out of your mind? And I was like, nope, I paid your deposit. And so I quit IBM, and 2 weeks later, we literally like packed everything up and just left for Vail. And I was like, Mom, I'm out. I'm going to be a skier.
I mean, is the goal that you want to be a ski bum, or is the goal that you want to be a pro skier, or what's the whole deal?
No, I had no idea. I just wanted to ski. I didn't want to be like a pro skier. It didn't even cross my mind at that point. I would just wanted to ski, and I wanted to do like freestyle, and I wanted to do cool stuff and live in the mountains. And so we lived, the first year I was there, we lived like the mountain life, you know, just like serving soup in the Vail cafeteria. We got promoted to the hot dog stand because they loved us, me and my buddy. Like, we had so much fun that it wasn't like it was a job. It was like, this is the greatest day ever. This is the best soup ever. You guys are going to love it. We used to make people laugh in the line. Like, we had so much fun. And so they promoted us to the doghouse. It was called the doghouse, and it was up somewhere up in the mid-mountain, and served gourmet hot dogs. And we did that, and we just had the best time ever. And I met Marren Miller there.
Whoa.
He came up and got hot dogs from us. And I was like, bro, you're my idol. I love your stuff. I love your movies. And he was like, oh, and we started talking and stuff. And he was an interesting character. And then from there, I decided, I was like, okay, now I'm going to go to the next level, and I'm going to be a ski instructor. So midway through that season, I tried out for ski instruction, and I got the job. So that was super fun.
So you're getting paid to ski, which is pretty amazing. So I guess you're a pro skier in that respect, in one aspect, not like you're used to in your poor boys days. But you're focused on skiing. Are you living the party lifestyle in Vail like so many people did? And did you like do BB&B and all that shit?
Oh, yeah. We did it all. We would get off work and go straight down to the pub at the bottom, you know, and do that full like après ski. We had tons of super cool friends. And we lived, the first year was like blaze of glory. It was like hilarious. We skied, we worked, we partied. We had so much fun. It was epic.
And there was a legion of bump skiers in Vail at that time, I think, wearing knee patches and just killing it. And were you a mogul skier before Vail, or is that something that you start focusing on when you get there?
You know, it's funny because I was always into moguls. And I think the reason I was into moguls is because you could do tricks, you could jump. Because where I grew up, the mountains in San Bernardino and in Wrightwood, you know, our local mountains, you couldn't jump. Anytime you jumped, you had to look over your shoulder because they're going to pull your pass. And all I wanted to do was fly. I just wanted to jump and fly through the air. And so moguls were my escape. That was like, oh, this is cool. I can do this. You know, we didn't have any cliffs to jump off of in Big Bear and Wrightwood. So it was moguls. And that was the coolest thing. And I remember going up, it was in Snow Summit, and they used to have a run called The Wall. And it was just this wall of moguls. And it was one double chair that went straight up it, and you could watch the good guys rip mogul lines all the way down. And I was like, damn, that's what I want to do. I want to be as good as that guy right there. I want to be as good as that guy right there. I used to say that as I'd go up the chair. And I was like, I want to be better than that guy. And so those were my like goals, were to be better than certain people I'd watch. And so when we got to Colorado and we were skiing in Vail, they had crazy zipper lines, like mogul lines that I've never seen before. And I was like, where did these things come from? Who made these things? And they were all natural, but it was Scott Kauf and Klaus Holm and all these insane mogul skiers. And so I kind of fell in love with mogul skiing the first year I got to Vail. And that's all I would do. I would do this line that was called Prima Pronto Log Chute.
Prima Cornice down?
Prima Cornice was up above it, but they had the run called Prima Pronto Log Chute. It was 3 of them. So you'd go 1, 2, and then the third one. And then you'd have to make a big loop and do it again. And I did that daily, all day, every day.
Did you fall in with the mogul crew at Vail at that time?
You know, it's funny because there was this one guy who, because we had seen the Mogul Tour come by.
Yep.
And we watched it and we were like, damn, that was the sickest thing ever. That's our dream right there. You know, that's amazing. And then one day we were skiing bumps, my buddy and I, Eric, and this guy comes flying through the moguls like 100 miles an hour. And we were like, who is this guy? And he stopped, and we kind of caught up to him because he was chilling for a second. And we stopped above him, and he was looking down at the next line he was going to do. Mm-hmm. And on the back of his jumpsuit, he was in like a one piece, which I had never seen either. And it said turbo. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then we met up with him in line because we wanted to figure this guy out. So we met up with him in line, and we're like, hey, what's up, dude? You rip at mogul skiing. Like, you're one of the best dudes I've ever seen. He's like, what up? My name's CJ Turbo Turner. You can call me Turbo. And I was like, you're awesome. I don't know who you are, but you are awesome.
Yeah.
And he was hilarious. And he was a really good mogul skier. And so we skied with him for like, I don't know, a few weeks, which turned into a longer friendship while I was in Vail. But one day he was like, you know, dude, you should come on the mogul tour with us. You're good enough to be there. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, you should be on the mogul tour. You got to quit instructing and come to the mogul tour. I was like, I don't know. He was like, come on. And he trained with me for a while. And then one day I was just like, okay, I'll go on the mogul tour. And up and went on the Bud Mogul Tour.
I mean, you say you up and went on the Bud Mogul Tour, but this is like the Pro Mogul Tour. Can you just up and go, or do you have to pay dues, or does someone have to qualify you? Or how do you actually go from being like, I want to be on the Mogul Tour, to showing up at an event and them giving you a bib and saying you can compete?
Yeah, I just signed up. At that time, I think it was just pretty loose from what I remember. It was crazy. I just was like, CJ walked me up there, and I like signed my name, and I was like in a heat. Like, okay, in 3 days you're in a heat.
Had you met McConkey at that point yet? Because he's also living in Vail, and he's on the Mogul Tour as well. So when do you first meet him?
So I see McConkey, and he's skiing around, and it was super fun because I delivered pizzas, he delivered pizzas, and we ended up becoming friends. And we had another friend named Jay, who was like myself, who ended up on the Mogul Tour as well. So between Jay, Shane, and myself, we were all like skiing together all the time. And, you know, McConkey was just so much better than me. He was just a phenom. And it was just fun to hang out with that guy. But yeah, McConkey was around. There was another guy named Hill, Mikey Hill. And his brother was Dave Hill, who was like 2-time or 3-time champion of the Bud Tour.
Okay.
So we ended up skiing with those guys. And then we all skied together because all of a sudden it was like this group of mogul skiers. And I just happened to like kind of fall into it. And I was like, I was just part of them. And I was like, wow, I'm in a crew. I'm in a mogul crew. I gotta get better. And so I just trained my ass off. I still couldn't beat those guys, but it was really fun. The process was fun. It was super fun to be out there. My friend was filming us, you know, just for fun. And that was epic. And my friend Eric, and he lived with me for a few years, and we had a blast. It was as good as it gets.
So Shane always had a video camera on him too, and he was always getting crazy, insane footage. I don't know if you had your camera. It sounds like Eric was filming you guys there. But was Shane always filming as well? And when you think about you were, I'm going to make this a long 2-part question, but you were the ringleader for your crew growing up, it sounds like, in high school. But does Shane become the ringleader for that whole mogul crew?
He kind of had his own thing going on because he used to hang out with Kent Kreitler a lot. And he was on the Spider Pro team, and he was getting flown around quite a bit. Like, he'd go other places a lot. So he would disappear.
So he was already a pro skier dude when you met him?
He was like gnarly pro skier. He had like this one-piece Spider outfit that he was on the team with, like Cameron Boyle and Kent Kreitler and him. And like he had gnarly guys. Like, he hung out on this crazy team. And it was super fun to be around him. I just didn't get to ski with him as much as I'd like to. Although I did do a trip with him across the country with Jay, and we just went across the country and we had a blast. And we skied all the East Coast events together. But at that time, I was fresh onto the Mogul Tour. We found some sponsors.
Who sponsored you?
Well, I had Nigel Skis.
Okay, with a K.
So that was cool. Yeah. So I had those guys, and I had this thing called the Oxygen Cocktail. And it was supposed to be like put oxygen into your drink, and then you're more oxygenated.
Okay.
And that was like this weird thing that this guy had invented. And so he was, you know, helping pay for us. And I was psyched. And I had some clothing stuff. And, you know, mom and dad kicked in. Like, it was the whole deal because I already had blown all my IBM money. Yeah. So, you know, we were doing the Pro Mogul thing.
I mean, is it pretty much one of those things where you're putting every penny into the whole Pro Mogul thing and there's not really a return on your investment per se, but it's like by far the most fun time in your entire life, dirtbagging it and going event to event?
Yeah. At that point, I turned into a bartender and I bartended at night or restaurant at night, waiting tables.
Yep.
I would just save money and then go onto the tour. I'd just save money and then go to an event, save money, go to an event. And in the summertime here in California, I'd come back for the summer and I'd have like 2 or 3 jobs. I'd work 3 jobs in 2 in one day. I'd do a day shift and go to a night shift and I would just save cash. And when it was time for fall, I would just head out to Colorado and I did it for years. And it was so fun.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Outdoor Research. While I love that they sponsor my podcast, I've been wearing OR gear since I moved to Seattle in 2000. I started with one of their rain jackets, as if you live in Seattle and don't own one, you're doing things wrong. And based on how amazing that jacket worked for me, Outdoor Research gear is the only outerwear I've bought with my own money. And I've been privileged over the years. I get a lot of free stuff, but I've still bought my gear from OR because it's the best. These days, while they've brought in new designers and the styles and the cuts have gotten cooler and more my style, one thing that won't change is the quality. That's the reason you see core skiers and snowboarders, climbers, and now mountain bikers swearing by OR. Because if you want the best, head on over to outdoorresearch.com to see what I'm talking about. Next up, it's Best Day Brewing. And if you're like me, you love having a cold one, but you don't have the time for the alcohol to slow you down. That's where Best Day comes in. Think all the flavor of your favorite beer, whether that be a Kolsch, a hazy IPA, a Mexican lager, the Shandy, or the brand new Pilsner, which is quickly becoming my favorite Best Day. And they come guilt-free, as Best Day has a fraction of the calories of your regular beer, they won't stop you from driving anywhere, and you won't be hungover in the morning. And for people who drink beer with alcohol, here is my secret trick to extending my night. Mix in a Best Day every couple drinks, and you'll find yourself to be more coherent, more fun, and primed to have your best day or night ever. Trust me, it definitely works. And to find out more about Best Day, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com or buy some on Amazon. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and they've been supporting this podcast for years before they became the hottest brand in America. Why did I want to work with Stanley? Because Stanley's products are light years better than the competition. While everyone knows about their quencher, which is everywhere, I swear by their adventure stacking beer pint glasses, and I use them every day. And when ski season comes around, I use Stanley's food jars and lunch boxes and bring them to the mountain to save me from buying $25 burgers. It's the ultimate saving money hack at the mountain. And Stanley's the brand that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold, and they've been doing it for over 100 years, so you know you're getting the best when you buy a Stanley. To find out more about all their products and collections, head on over to stanley1913.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So that cycle, that Groundhog Day cycle, is like you work hard for 3-4 months, like harder than anybody else, but then you know for the next 8 months, you're going to have an awesome time and you're not going to have to worry about making that much money because you've already put in the work?
Kinda, yeah. I would do it pretty much like that. And then I would still like have some sort of job in Vail at night. But that had to be loose so that I could travel and do that kind of stuff. And it was epic and I loved it. And I did that for like 6 years, I think. And, won a few heats, but never really did anything super huge. I think I might have been on the podium once in some other events, but never like crushed it. But I was really enjoying it and having a good time.
And when you think about the lifestyle, traveling place to place, I mean, there has to be a highlight for you of that lifestyle and that time in your life. What's the one thing that sticks out or the one story that just like sums up exactly what the Pro Mogul Tour was to you?
I think when we would go to Aspen, actually, because you'd go all over, there'd be like Squaw Valley, and you'd go to the East Coast, which was really fun too. East Coast was really fun because the nightlife was so cool. It was so different and so awesome. The people were really epic, but the moguls were rock hard. Right. But when we went to Aspen, it was really fun. They had an epic course. The town was alive. At that time, après ski, and like when you were done with the day of mogul skiing, you'd go and you'd hang with all the guys, and it was just a blast. And sometimes that would mean 2 a.m, Yeah. So it was super fun. I mean, we weren't the athletes like they are now, where where they're super tuned.
And it wasn't the Aspen like it is now.
Yeah, it was so fun, man. It was so fun. It was something I'll never forget, and especially being with those guys. And Steamboat was another one that was just like out of control fun. And I really enjoyed skiing around the mountain afterwards, before, and it was just such good times and such great people. And then I started watching films. And that's when some stuff started to change.
I've got 2 Shane questions, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of film stuff. But
Sure.
Were you there to witness Shane getting banned from Vail?
Yeah, we filmed it. If you go into the MSP film movie, it's actually the footage that Eric shot, because I was in the event, and my buddy Eric Shearer actually shot the shot, and it's him doing the backflip, or no, a spread eagle naked. So on his run, he did a backflip. They were like, "You're banned for life," and so he was like, "Screw that," and he's like, "Here." Went up to the top and just took off his clothes and got in the gate. They were like ready to do 3, 2, 1. He just moved somebody out of the way, got in the gate, and proceeded to bump down completely naked, did a big spread eagle, fell, got back up, finished the run. And he was like, "Okay, make sure," to my buddy Eric, "you have my clothes waiting for me at the bottom." And yeah, we were part of that. It was pretty funny.
All right, outside of that one, what's your best McConkey story? Because I like to get a history of his stories.
Best McConkey story? McConkey was the man. He was hilarious. And I have 2 McConkey stories.
I'd like to hear both.
One, he was like, "Dude, you're never going to believe it. These guys are going to pay me to drink this crazy drink." And I was like, "What is it? What is it?" He's like, "Come over right now." So I went over to his place, and he's like, "Check this out." And he opened up the trunk of his car, and it was like some cases of Red Bull and a bunch of cans like littered around the back. And I was like, "Are you kidding me, dude? What is this stuff?" And he's like, "I don't know. It might be from a bowl." And he said some funny stuff. And it was literally, that's where he started Red Bull. It was like right there. That was his Red Bull coming out party. Like, that was the first time I had ever seen Red Bull. That was the first time he ever got Red Bull. And it was like within days, I had seen it. So he's like, "You got to see this, come over." And he had this Red Bull. And I was like, "What do you have to do?" He goes, "It's the craziest thing, man. I don't have to do anything. All they want me to do is drink it." I was like, "They're going to pay you just to drink it." He's like, "Yeah, no stickers, no nothing. Just drink it." I was like, whoa, that's a cool company.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so that was my McConkey Red Bull story. And then the other one is just his fascination with The Simpsons. So when we traveled, that little camera that he had, that little camcorder, it was like a yellow one.
Yep.
It was like a mini DV. What he actually had most of the time on that thing was recorded Simpson episodes. He had The Simpsons everywhere we went. It was like ridiculous. Simpsons.
I had no idea that was part of his repertoire of things that he liked, but I guess I only got to know him for a few years and I never got to see what he was watching. But when you think about the development of your career, or your film career at least, I think there's 2 things that were really big for you. First, there's a defining moment in your life, and like a lot of skiers, it has to do with Marren Miller. And it's not at the hot dog stand where you met him a few years before, but I feel like while you might have been inspired with him, you also filmed with him. And can you describe the experience of filming with Marren Miller?
So, yeah. So this basically, Marren Miller inspired me to be a filmmaker. But Marren Miller also pissed me off so bad that he made me a filmmaker. So what happened was, it was the Bud Mogul Tour. They were on Vail. It was like the height of like me feeling like I'm a mogul skier, pro mogul skier. And they came out to film, and I was so excited. And the best guys in the world were there. It was Cameron Boyle. He was like a multi-time, mogul champion. It was Mikey Hild and Scott Kauf and all these guys. And they made a Marren Miller segment, and they were like, "Okay, let's do this. We're gonna film for like 3 days and make this sick segment." And Marren Miller films at the time were like an hour and a half. They were super long. And when the segment came back, it was like, I don't know, between 3 and 4 minutes long. And it was like 50% crashes. And I was like, what the frick? And I was like, and they didn't even give me any shots. Like, I don't know. I was in it for like a half a second or something. And I was like, I killed myself for that segment. I was like, this is the coolest stuff ever. Like, freestyle is the coolest skiing on the planet right now. There's nothing better. And it was before all the other stuff. You know, before there was flipping and spinning.
Yep.
You know, you could only do that in aerials. And for me, freestyle was the cutting edge, coolest part of skiing at the time. And Big Mountain. You know, it was like that new Big Mountain era of Shane McConkey and Kent Kreitler and those guys.
Yeah, early 90s stuff.
It was like, yeah, it was those two things that were cool. And I was like, screw that. I remember laying on my bed and I was like, Eric, that's it. I can't take it. We need to make our own movie. He's like, what? I was like, we're making our own movie. You're going back to Vail. Because he didn't want to go back to Vail. He was done with it. I was like, you're going back to Vail. We're going to film. And he's like, oh my God. And I was like, we're doing it. You can't say anything. We're going back. You're going to be the filmer. And so we went back to Vail. And we decided I was still on the Mogul Tour, but I was like, okay, we're going to shoot the Mogul Tour because it's moguls, and we're going to make a film at the same time. And at that time, I was training with Scott Kauf. So I actually started to train because I wanted to be good for once.
Sure.
And so I was training with Scott Kauf, and we filmed Scott Kauf, Mikey Hild, Dave Hild. We filmed Cameron Boyle, and we filmed all these guys that ripped, even Sergey Shuplasov before he died. And we had amazing mogul footage. It was like the best mogul film at the time that had ever been put out.
And it's like a 2-year project, right?
It was a 1-year project. It was like, I don't know, maybe 1.5.
Okay.
But it was called Fade to Black.
Yes.
And yeah, basically like a 2-year project. And we had the best mogul skiing ever at the time. It was good filming, but we were amateur filmers, you know. I filmed a little bit, but Eric pretty much shot the whole thing on high 8. And we were inspired, you know, all the years of Greg Stump and Marren Miller and the very earliest MSP film. I was like, wow, that was sick. And so those movies were ingrained in my, you know, for the ski side. And then I grew up watching surf films.
Sure.
And that was my culture, right? So surf filmmaking was my culture, 100%. And so I was like, I'm going to make a freaking ski film that looks like a surf film because that's the way it should be done. Everyone's location. I want to be athlete. And so even though it was not a great ski freestyle film, it was good action and it was individualized. It wasn't like Aspen, Verbier. You know, it was like this guy's name and this guy's name and this guy's name. And I wanted to do that for people. Like I wanted to show the best stuff.
Yeah, you're not there to sell a location to sell vacations. You're there to sell the athletes and get people fired up on the skiing. And where Marren Miller almost clowns it in that 4-minute segment showing 50% of crashes, you're like inspired to be like, I have to show the world how cool the shit we're doing is.
Yeah, that was it. 100%. I just wanted to show how cool skiing was. Like, this is it. This is so rad. This is my side. I love the Big Mountain. Damn, those guys are good. McConkey, you're insane. Seth Morrison, you're my idol. But I'm going to show freestyle because this is my genre. So I didn't care about Big Mountain at that time. All I wanted to show was freestyle. And so that's what we made, Fade to Black.
And is that when you officially start Poor Boyz Productions at that time? Like, you know it's going to be a business and you actually create a company and do all of that stuff?
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be a business per se. All I knew is that I wanted to show people cool skiing. And we put a name to it, and that was Poor Boyz Productions because we didn't have a dime. I had a leftover credit card from IBM, and it was a gold American Express card. And so I just put as much money as I could on the American Express card. Like, absolutely maxed it.
And that's how you fund the movie?
Yeah, and that's how we bought the camera gear and funded, you know, a part of it.
And then when you think about making the movie, I mean, back then it was all like VHS tapes, I would think, and distribution, I would think, would be a huge challenge to a dude like yourself who's so new to everything. You're just figuring out filmmaking. How are you able to get people to actually see Fade to Black?
Well, it's crazy because I didn't think about that part of it at the time. I was just like, make a cool movie. That's all that matters. So we make the movie. We high-five each other. We're like, this is sick. We made something cool. Now what do we do? So we didn't know what to do. There was no distribution. I had no idea what to do with it. But I made like 20 copies. And so I made 20 copies, and the Mogul Tour was headed up by the president at the time named Scott Kauf, who was like my hero at that time. He was like the man, right? He was coaching me. He was the best mogul skier I had in front of my face every day.
He's your mentor, the guy you want to film, all that.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I'm like, okay, Scott, what am I going to do with this thing? He's like, hey, we're going to have a booth at SIA in Vegas. You should come out there. And if you want to put a TV in there and show the film, you're welcome to, because it's really cool. We thank you for doing it, because I used 80% of it was from the tour, all the shots. So I was like, yeah, dude, it's publicity for you guys, and it's great for me. I'm just going to show it and see what happens. And I had no idea what would happen, right? So I take it there, and I'm like pretty cocky kid. I was the confident kind of leader kid. So I was kind of cocky and confident. And this bushy-haired, like super bushy-haired, red hair came up to me. We're showing the film at SIA. There's thousands of people there. It was the big days of SIA. And he's like, hey, man, I like your film. Did you make that? And I was like, yeah, I made that. Yeah, I love it. I love mogul skiing. He's like, yeah, me too. Me too. And he had a funny accent. And they stood there and watched it, him and his buddy.
Did anybody care other than him and his buddy? Because
no.
Before we jump forward, at this point, the ski industry is like a turtleneck wearing kind of stale area where moguls is the only cool thing, but not that many people recognize it. And then at that trade show, while you might be the cool California kid, there's not that many people like you there unless they're on the snowboard side, because that's a fucking party. And that's where all the cool shit's happening, not on the ski side. So do you feel like I should be over on the snowboard side, but I'm stuck here with skiing and I have to make it cool?
Yeah, that was exactly what was going through my mind. It was exactly, I walked the snowboard side and it was like psycho. It was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, this is crazy. Our sport is so cool. Why do they get all the fun? And I'm over here by myself in a little booth, and everyone else is like exactly that, turtleneck wearing, kind of weird. And here I am at like lonely little booth. But this kid with cool clothes on, came up to me and was like, hey, I like your film. And then he's like, hey, after they watched it and stood there with me not saying much, I was kind of too cool for school. And then he pulled out a VHS and he's like, hey, man, I've got some really cool footage that I think we're kind of on the same page here. He goes, I ski moguls too. And I was like, oh, rad, really? Oh, okay, cool. And then he's like, do you want me to put it in so you can watch it? And I was like, oh, I'll let this finish the loop and then I'll take it out and put yours in. He's like, okay, I'll leave it with you and come back and get it in a little bit. I know. What a dick I was.
Yeah, totally.
And
like ruining someone's dreams, but not totally.
I know. I was like, what a jerk. So the thing ends and I had forgotten about it by then. And I was like, oh, shoot, there's that tape. And I pulled mine out and I put it in. And I was like, my jaw dropped. And I was like, wait. This is the first ever Misty flip I've ever seen. And it wasn't even landed. It was just like almost landed. And I was like, what the hell was that? These guys are doing snowboard shit. And I was like, who is this guy? And I walked around in circles with the tape in my hand. And I walked around with 10,000 people in there. And I walked until I found the bushy-haired kid. And it happened to be Shane Szocs and his buddy Glenn Mittendorfer.
Okay.
And they had a Huck doll. They had a Huck doll when Huck dolls were just being invented. It was like his homemade Huck doll. And we had this crazy conversation. I talked to him about his stuff. And I was like, dude, you are exactly what I'm trying to do in life. Like, I can't believe it. You actually are the person that I'm looking for. And even though I wasn't looking for anyone, I kind of was. And he's like, hey, do you want to come to Canada? You can come film us. Because I was like, I'm making a new film right now. Because I was making State of Mind. And he's like, yeah, you should come to Canada and film us, and we could hang out together. He's like, you can stay at my dad's place. I was like, sick. And in hindsight, he actually told me he never thought I would actually call and come.
I mean, that's like you meet a stranger. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, oh my God, this crazy kid from California is actually coming up here. And that turned out to be some of the most groundbreaking footage ever filmed, or captured rather.
And Johnny, before we talk about that, because I feel like we've been going for an hour, and I told you that we'd do this for an hour, and we'd do part 2 if we could. Would you be down to do a part 2?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to.
Okay, so we'll do that in a couple minutes. I have a couple more questions, and then I have something that I call Inappropriate Questions for you, which is how I end every show. But before we talk about Szocs and you going up to Whistler, because I think it's a good time to stop right before that, because that's when a lot of shit really happens in the ski industry. Poor Boyz Productions. When you think about that name, 30 years later, however many years later. I'm guessing you thought the name was funny when you named it because it defined exactly who you were. You had no money and you were struggling to get shit done. But if you could do it all over, would you choose something different?
No, I think it's a funny name. I think it's cool. I feel like I curse myself at times because I'm not, like Rich Boy Productions. Although we made a sign called Rich Boy Productions once.
Okay. Because it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like when you're Poor Boys Productions and you're negotiating a deal, someone can be like, well, these guys are poor boys. I mean, we can give them 10 grand. They're going to be fucking psyched.
Yeah. And that's probably happened many times. So yeah, there's sometimes I wish I could change it, but it was an inspired name. It was like inspiring at the time. I had, other companies that were called Poor Specimen Productions, which was a surf company. And I absolutely idolized what they were doing. And I watched them from their very earliest times as a surfer. And they were the ones who discovered Kelly Slater and Rob Machado and, those guys. And it was Taylor Steele. So Poor was already stuck in my brain. And then when I was absolutely broke as a joke, when we decided to name the company, it kind of fit. So we were like, we're going to be Poor Boys Productions. So, it was a double-edged sword, but yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I don't hate it by any means. I definitely like it, but I feel like maybe there would be a way to get more money out of sponsors if it wasn't Poor Boys. But what do I know? I'm not sure, actually. Who knows? But another thing that I want to talk about real quick before we go to Inappropriate Questions is the inaugural X Games happened right around then. And I think you went to that thing on your snowboard because there were no skis there. I mean, there was like super modified shovel racing and there was ice mountain biking. I don't even know what shit was going on there, but there was no skiing there. Was that really frustrating for you, but also motivating? Like, I have to do whatever I can to get skiing cool enough to be in here?
Yeah. What's funny about that is that reminds me of like why we made a second film. So before I decided to make a second film, I was already happy with Fade to Black, right? We made a film, yay, it was done. And I was like, okay, I'm going back to California, and I think that was basically going to be the end of it. And that's exactly when it happened, was X Games.
It was Big Bear, right?
Yeah, it was Big Bear. And I went, and I was on a snowboard. I actually took my snowboard, because snowboarding was cool, even though I was a skier. And because there was no skiing in it, I decided to go on my snowboard. And so I went and I watched the X Games, the modified shovel racing, the whole deal. And when I saw the snowboarding in the half pipe, I was like, damn, dude, skiing's cool. We could do this. It actually motivated me more.
That was the state of mind right there of like, I'm motivated and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah. And that's why I called it State of Mind. State of mind was just like, it's just a state of mind. We can be as good as anyone else. There was something to do with that at that time. And that was like it was almost like it pissed me off too. It was like, oh man, we're not going to get left in the dust. Screw that. And that's when it started.
Well, a lot of great ideas come out of frustration or anger or a bunch of different things. It sounds like State of Mind did as well. But at this point, we've been going longer than I promised, which I knew we were going to do. And we have so much more to talk about because we really haven't talked about your big film career, just the beginning of it. But this is the part of the show that I call Inappropriate Questions. And I get someone that to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I was able to get a longtime Poor Boys Productions guy, a guy I know well from Washington, Cody Carter, to ask 3 questions to you. And are you ready for question number 1 from Cody?
Okay, yeah, go for it.
The first one is a layup, and then I don't remember what the other 2 are.
Okay.
Which athlete was the hardest to work with?
Putting you on the spot, asking you to call someone out. I love it. It is definitely inappropriate. Do you have one in mind? That I'm sure you do.
Which athlete was the hardest to work with? No, because it's coming from Cody, which is interesting because it's probably before. Once Cody came on board, he was there forever. But I would say like the hardest athlete to work with back in the early days was JF Kusan.
What would be the reason for that? Was he too cool for school? Was it the language barrier? Was he just didn't want to do shit that people wanted him to do? Was he fuck authority? What was the deal with him?
Yeah, it was kind of more like, I'd be like, okay, guys, we're going 7:00 tomorrow morning. We're going to do the quarter pipe thing. And then hopefully we'll have it shaped so that we can have it done by the evening. He'd be like, hey, Johnny, hey, fuck you. I'm going to go to party tonight. We go at 10 in the morning. I'd be like, okay. No.
And when he's one of the biggest talents you have, it's kind of like frustrating, I would think, but you have to do it.
Yeah. The other guys were so easy. Like Szocs was so motivated, man. He was like the ringleader of motivation. And JP was right there too. And him and Vinny and Kusan were kind of off the other end of the spectrum.
All right. Well, we will jump into question number 2.
What happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas. In 2007, with Chuck Platt from Good Riddance, care to tell us the details of how your night ended, if you can remember it?
Now, I remember this show. It was Good Riddance at a bar. I remember it had 2 levels. I remember seeing you and Mike Goot. I don't know if you were as hammered as he was, but just standing in front of Chuck and pointing at him the whole time he was playing. What happened that night?
Oh, my God. That night, I was introduced to Monster Energy Drink.
Okay.
That's what happened. So they had this crazy VIP section, and they were like, hey, you guys can go in one of those booths right there. And we went in there, and there was like Monster and vodka. And I had never even heard of Monster. And I drank, I don't know how many I drank. I don't even know. I just remember drinking it. And the next thing you know, I was pointing at Chuck Platt, and I slapped him when he came off stage so hard because we were, for some reason, doing slap fights. And I remember absolutely cracking him, and he cracked me back. And it was like rock star status stuff. And then I came to at a roulette table, and I was arm in arm with Todd Jones. And I was like, whoa, what is going on here? And there was a girl with her hand in my pocket taking all the chips out. And she was like, you don't mind if I borrow these? And that's all I remember. And then the next thing I know, I was in our hotel room, and it was ugly.
That is really amazing, because when Cody said the question, I'm like, oh my God, that was the night that someone called me on my cell and was like, dude, you need to get to this bar right now because Goot is going to need you. And by the time I got to the bar, I saw you guys up front for like a half hour or whatever. Then Goot came up to our area and he just like passed out on the floor, and we eventually got him out of there. But I didn't know what happened to you, and it's funny to kind of hear that backstory. We will jump into the final inappropriate question.
In 2008, during the making of Reasons, you were going back and forth to Colombia in hopes to get your family up. However, you left certain things on a hard drive labeled Johnny Private that had the rhymes of Dr. Seuss. Care to elaborate on that?
Wow. Of course, Cody would go somewhere weird like that.
Well, Cody saw the folder and decided to go in it instead of Johnny Private. He said once he saw Johnny Private, he knew he was going to look in that folder.
I know. Why would he click on it?
He was
so
young.
Funny. It was kind of a joke. It could be inappropriate. It's definitely an appropriate question. It had something to do with a Dr. Seuss sock. Dr. Seuss, you know?
Yeah.
You know, the colored socks that he had? You know those colored socks?
Yeah, it's like the striped sock with the Red Hot Chili Pepper kind of photo.
Yeah, and it was kind of like a Red Hot Chili Pepper kind of moment.
Okay, fair enough.
So, yeah, covered up something, and somehow there was a photo of it.
And Cody was able to see it, so good for you, Cody Carter. Thank you for asking the questions. Johnny, thank you for answering them, because sometimes when people ask you to call out a person and then ask you about an inappropriate picture, some people get a little bit shy. I thought you might, but you didn't, which I respect the shit out of. I also want to thank you very much for your time. I would do a nice long outro here, but we're going to do a part 2 next week. So at this point, I'm going to say it's Friday night. Have a great night with you and your family, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, boys. Peace out. Thanks, Mike.
So that was time with Johnny Decesare, and while we haven't gotten that deep into his story, I feel like outside of his tireless work ethic, the reason Johnny has been such a success with everything that he's done is because of his personality. He's a total leader, but in that cool guy way where you want him to be your friend because he's such a rad dude. And really, the more I do things in life, the more I've realized that with marketing and business, while there are some hard lines and metrics that need to be hit, the one thing that helps facilitate growth, helps build community and success is the power of relationships, and Johnny is the master of that. While we'll get to more Johnny next week, at this point, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to please review me wherever you listen, and if you have any questions, concerns, or guest suggestions, please email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com. I will get back to you. Finally, please support my incredible sponsors, that make this show happen. They are Outdoor Research, Elon Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Club Med, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.